Thank you very much for having me here. You see, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Mumbai conducted experiments for almost 5 decades in the latter half of the last century in KGF, early 50s to mid 90s. And I happened to be in two of the experiments they did, one in the 60s and another in the 90s. Why did scientists go to KGF at all for doing anything? Now, you are very familiar now. If you want to look at stars very clearly, you got to go to middle of a forest or something like that. So the same thing applies here. Now what happens is all over now here itself or on the ground, there are plenty of particles, electrons, etc., which you may be familiar with. And so if you want to look for something new, you got to get away from them. So what happens is most of these particles get absorbed in the earth and they don't go down in the mines, don't underground. Only few particles go underground, and those few particles were what interested scientists in the 60s and even today. So one of the discoveries, which I'm not going to talk much about, was of the so-called neutrinos in the 60s, mid-60s actually. And that was almost what we would call Nobel-worthy type of experiment. Now I'll say a little about the social aspects of KGF. You see, when I was in 60s there, I was in my early 20s at that time, and we did not have much infrastructure. The mines provided us with everything, and they were very good to us. Probably the spirit of independence had not waned away. And they looked after us very well. They gave us nice bungalows, even membership in KGF Club, which was only for higher officers. And at that time, actually, as one of the people put it in the film, it was a very nice life in KGF. And the miners are mostly Tamil, as Professor Janki Nair put it. And there were Anglo-Indian, mostly officers in the middle, and most of the officers at higher level were Kannada people. And actually inside, if you did no Tamil, you would have problems. So that was the type of life. And hospital was very good, really, better than your Bangalore hospitals. And clubs were full, tennis courts were full, like that. But with all that, there is a creeping feeling that it's going to end sometime. And some of the Anglo-Indians had already left for Australia in the mid-60s. Now, when I went back there 2 decades later, things had changed quite a lot. And it was actually the mining quarters, etc., which had Anglo-Indians at that time, earlier. Most of them were empty. There were no children anymore, no kids playing around. It already had become a ghost town in the 80s. And so it had lost its splendor by that time. In the mid-90s, when TFR wanted to continue the experiments, the mining people said that it's going to cost you, I may be a little off here, 8 crores per year to run the experiment. Even for an institute like TFR, 8 crores was too much. And we had to close down the experiments. Now, as far as the, actually, this was quite bad for Indian science because there are a lot of interesting things which my colleague here may talk about later. A lot of interesting research can be done in underground labs. You know, we have ISRO, we are all proud of, but fundamental research also has to be encouraged in this country, and we need underground labs. And KGF would have provided a wonderful lab, but unfortunately, it won't be there. And from what I hear, that is already there's a lot of water there, and it's really not going to be any of use. As at the very end, they said the cyanide dams, they've been talking about it since I went there in the 60s. They're going to get gold out of it. I don't know when they will get here. So this is the story of KGF as I saw it from, quite near. And I thank Mr. Biradar for a nice account, and actually it makes me nostalgia when I see some of those buildings. Thank you.
All right, so I'm not sure how much time we have, so let me just say that, if you don't have time, I'll be happy to answer questions after the event as well. I'll be outside. So just as a quick self-introduction, so as they said, I'm Nirmal Raj. I'm a faculty at the Indian Institute of Science. I research particle physics. I'm mostly a theorist, unlike Professor Vishwanath, who's an experimentalist, although I have been involved in one experiment, and I'm a member of a very small club of humans who has been down a mine. I've been down the Crichton mine in Canada. It's currently the deepest mine that has scientific experiments being conducted in it. I got a very nice tour of all the experiments. So some of the things I saw here, like the lift going down, I was able to relate to all of that actually. It's a very fantastic experience. Highly recommend it if you can manage it. So I thought I'll give a short introduction to maybe neutrinos and the sort of things that were measured at the KGF experiments, and then we'll take it from there. Maybe I'll be happy to answer questions, etc. So, okay, well, I'm only a student of history as far as the experiments are concerned. I was obviously not involved with the experiments, but the mainest thing, in my opinion, and I'm sorry if that wasn't something that you were involved in, but one of the most historic things, to my knowledge, that had happened at the KGF experiments was the measurement, the detection of atmospheric neutrinos. Okay. So what is that? So neutrinos are, there are many species of particles that make up the universe. Neutrinos are very special, very mysterious. One of the things that makes them very special is that almost everything is transparent to them. So right now, if you put up your finger, there's like 100 trillion neutrinos just from the sun passing through the first third of your finger every second. Okay, so 100 trillion neutrinos passing through your finger every second just from the sun. So the sun is one copious source of neutrinos. But there's another very important source of neutrinos from which we'll learn a lot about neutrinos and the world that we live in, which is the Earth's atmosphere itself. And the way that comes about is, Professor Vishwanath just mentioned cosmic rays, right? So we are bombarded right now with protons and electrons and all sorts of nuclei coming from all over the universe. Okay, it's a very magnificent thing that right now it's raining down on your head right now, actually. And these cosmic rays, as they come down, when they hit the atmosphere, a lot of them break the nuclei and the atmosphere, and in the process of breaking, they also produce a truckload of neutrinos. So that's atmospheric neutrinos. These are very energetic neutrinos. And that one of the very first measurements of these neutrinos was done at the KGF mine. I say one of the first because it was actually the Indian team that got it published first on August 15, 1965, if I remember correctly. I remember it was Independence Day. So we actually got it published first, But we have to admit that we actually got there second. There was a parallel experiment that was being done in South Africa at that time. They had seen it 2 months before us, except we got it written up quicker, and then we published it 2 weeks before them. So this is a race, a historic race in which there are no losers but 2 winners, I would say. But something we should be proud of. So that was, I think that is one of the biggest legacies of the KGF experiments. When I talk to my colleagues about KGF, this is one of the first things that comes up. Another very interesting thing that comes up is that at Kolar, across 2 stretches of experiments, I don't remember the decades, I think the 70s and the 80s, the experimentalists had seen some very screwy, anomalous events. Okay, so they have some very peculiar signatures in the detectors that have not been reproduced in any other detector in the world ever since. And this is still a mystery, actually. These are called the Kolar events in the literature. And that is a funny name to me because I come from Chennai, and in Tamil, Kolar means anomaly. So, so when you say Kolar events, it already sounds like it's anomalous events. But nevertheless, the coincidence stands. The Kolar events are a long-standing mystery. Nobody's been able to actually explain it. I had a look at it. I have some pet theories about it. But that's another interesting legacy of the KGF experiments. Yeah, I'll stop here. I'll let the main man take over. But I'm happy to interact more.
Yeah, I think we can just do Q&A, no? I mean, yeah, that's probably because for me, I think what was interesting was that I went with I started researching KGF with some other thing in mind and ended up getting interested in some other subjects because you don't expect so much in one small town, right? So what I found most interesting, and I hope it comes through the film, is that how different strata of people remember things differently. How memory plays a role in where we stand in the social and economic hierarchy, etc., and how so that was very interesting for me as someone coming from the non-science background. So that was one thing, and so that's what I wanted to sort of capture. I wanted to create a visual portrait of the place and the different kind of threads, which, like, for example, you can make one film on each of them. They're so complex because religion is also a very complex idea in KGF because one of their main deities is Mother of Minds, and who's in fact in everybody's house, whether you're a Hindu or a Christian or Muslim, it doesn't matter in KGF. So that's something in today's India is like, wow, nobody would imagine that, right? But I went to someone's house who's actually, by birth Brahmin, and he said, hey, come, I'll show you. And in his home temple, the room, there was the Mother of Minds deity. So it sort of tells you how KGF became central to many lives in very different ways. And also, of course, the nostalgia plays out differently for different people. And that was what was interesting. And of course, visually, it's very striking. If you haven't visited, you should, because so much huge equipment lying around, unattended, is something we are not familiar with, right? We're living in urban areas, etc. So it's just unbelievable that it's a total of about 12,079 acres. So that's quite a bit of land. So with different shafts, I saw you all were naming the shafts when you were seeing the visuals. So yeah, so different mining companies, and it's very, very visually striking. So if you're someone who likes to sketch or even have some interest in images, you should visit it. It's really fascinating to see how it is. And also, I think to think of it as, unfortunately, we don't think of it as industrial heritage is not thought of as heritage in India for some vague reason. I don't know why. But for example, if you go to America or Australia, they will have a mines tour for which they will charge you $25 or something, like you go. But nobody has thought of that to do it in KGF, it's... No, I meant from the government, not you. So yeah, so that's it could be a fascinating place for people who don't know anything about mining and to just visit and see how the life of a miner was, which is what I tried a little bit with the film to sort of bring stories of how they would work with candles. I mean, it's unimaginable. And because it is so hot, they had to, work bare-chested. And it's sort of, and deaths were so common, everyday thing. So it's just, something which is alternate reality in today's world to sort of think of it. And that's something I think we should push wherever we can to the government or people responsible to sort of make it as some, industrial heritage needs to be saved and preserved for future generations to learn how many miners actually work there to sort of bring the riches which have been, part of the India's story, so to say, which also led to, the experiments like scientific experiments, etc. Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't be talking more. So any questions? I think we all are here to interact. So.
Hi, hello everyone. So in terms of the fact that it was mentioned clearly, KGF is one of the deepest mines. Okay, am I audible now? Yeah. So given the fact that KGF is one of the deepest mines, and if we also talk about other mines like Bellary or the coal mines in Korba, Chhattisgarh, or the mica mines in Uttar Pradesh, one of the fact that really strikes out to me is how cruel it is, how harsh the conditions are. And silicosis was mentioned. There were facts about how there was one section of the people living in KGF who were going to balls and to dances, and one section who received the shorter end of the stick, who couldn't even afford a nose ring for their families despite working in the mines. There were genetic diseases, hereditary diseases that passed on to the future generations. I want to know whether you felt it, that these people living there for years, it was deeply rooted in their mindset that this is normal. Living in KGF is their home. This is what we've been doing for generations. This is what we are going to do until it's closed down. Did none of them ever come to you and told them that this is, I want to escape out of here. My father used to do it, but I want to do something different. Did you feel that this had become a part of their daily lives? It was habitual, it was rooted, and not something in terms of whether it could be escaped and shown to the real world. Did you feel in any of the research that went through, or during the filming, did you feel that?
Yeah, I mean, when the mine started, you have to realize that India was a feudal society. So the people, as Janki put it very politely in the film, a lot of the labor which came were from lower castes because they were suffering in the feudal societies. They were, beaten up by feudal lords and, used as wanted. So they actually cherished KGF better than living in a sort of a feudal India, so to say, right? So they were happy to work with the British because there was some sort of respect to what their skills are, even though they were very menial skills, let's say. But so they were very willing to escape the feudal society and come and work in KGF. And British sort of exploited that, So there was a little bit, I mean, that is not in the film, but one of the findings of my research was that, so the British had they had like their own Varna system, let's say. So they knew that, certain castes can do certain jobs well. So they sort of, or certain castes won't do certain jobs. So they, like for example, in KGF, you had the lower castes doing like the one person who spoke about, just mud, slush, removing very menial, unskilled labor. And then they knew that Anglo-Indians had one skill, which is the language, so they could be the middle management. They can speak to the British as well as the Europeans as well as the Indian workers below them. So they naturally were put in the middle management, and the workers always tended to be the lower caste for the unskilled labor. And carpenters, for example, in KGF were brought from Malabar because Malabar carpentry was well known, and whole security in KGF was from Northwest province, which is, Punjab, Pakistan today and all that, right? Because by caste, it is considered a, warrior caste or martial caste, they were Punjabis and stuff. So they would be hired, and so there is a legacy of them also in KGF, so to say. So the British sort of organized this new township with this kind of their own signs that they had around where which labor will come from. So, and of course, the new generations, nobody, many of them don't have, like I said, there is no jobs there. So today the biggest thing in KGF is they all come to Bangalore, do a job and go back in the evening. So there are a lot of trains, which, is about 6-7 trains in the day. So they,
That happened in the 80s itself. These people coming over to Bangalore.
Yes, yeah. Like he says, in the 80s itself, there was the mine workers' population had reduced quite a bit in the mines because the production was very less, so to say. So of course, I mean, anybody would want to get out of it, but I think they were already getting out of something which was worse than this. So that's what we need to realize. So they were happy to work, and that's why they all, sort of still have. Like they will say, for example, in KGF, if you go that, all our children were literate in KGF. Show me someone in our court like that from our caste, they'll tell you that. So it's very, because KGF had, even though there were different levels of privilege, but schools were there for everybody. Even it may not be a great school like the European school, but they had one, and Anglo-Indians had one school, but these guys also, the lower caste or lower level workers also had one school. Whereas if you go back to their feudal villages, it was more harsh life than this. So in a way, they were already escaping a harsh life to come here. Yeah.
Great film, definitely gave me a lot to think about. I especially wanted to ask you about the labor movement that is also sort of present in the film. And I was sort of just drawing a contrast between the times then and now. Something as important as the Workmen's Compensation Act was created just because of their efforts in a way, right? All the people coming together. So how would you say the organization was with regards to the times then? And why would you say something like that is not really pushing forward in the current time? That's what I wanted to ask.
I mean, that's another was of my pet interests of KGF, which I'm still trying to find out, is like, I mean, if you look at all the social and conditions available at that part, like how Marx would say, it was ideal for a communist movement, and no doubt the workers' movement was very powerful in KGF for a very long time. Not just the Communist Party, even something like the Republican Party of India, which was earlier the Scheduled Caste Federation, had, like Ambedkar visited KGF in 1950s. So, there was a lot of that, and in fact, the earliest Buddhist movement in India is in KGF. It started in 1905. Ambedkar only adopted it in the 20s. So 20 years earlier, KGF was already doing this, sort of lower caste people taking up to Buddhism. So you will still see those buildings there. So the workers' movement, obviously, because of the conditions available, because there is so much of daily wage work there, so the unions were a big thing. So, and of course, with time, post-independence, we had every party had a union, like Congress, and then Scheduled Caste Federation, as well as the Communist Party. So that's why I was very, it is very amusing to see, Marx and Ambedkar visuals everywhere in KGF, It's very something which we are not so familiar with. We don't imagine these things. That's why I kept some of those visuals there. You'll see Marx, Lenin, and Engels, which were there in the, like the workers' house, lines, what they call as the lines, the workers, where the houses are, right? And since they had housing issues, like for example, the hospital I showed you, but the workers were not allowed to use the hospital for a very long time. So only the union made it happen through strikes, etc. Only the official cadre was treated in the KGF hospital for a very long time. So the workers' usage of hospital came much later. So those kind of basic facilities, they struggled a lot, and there have been plenty of strikes. The two most interesting or most impactful strikes were what were briefly discussed in the film 1930, and like 1930 strike reminds me of the whole Aadhaar thing, because it was about, at the end of the day, biometric, right? So thumb imprint, and how they were, intuitively they went against it. and the British had to, in fact, Mirza Ismail, who was the Diwan, had to sort of, one thing which is not in the film is the sort of how Mysore princely state also played its role in this whole thing, right? Because the company had to pay the Mysore princely state a royalty at the end of each year from the gold produced. So, and that was a good revenue for Mysore princely state. So they would obviously support the corporation's interests. For example, one of the great things which Janki writes about quite extensively in her book is that very unique thing is that the John Taylor and Sons Company representative was part of the Karnataka Mysore Assembly, as which is coveted as the first democratic movement in Indian princely states in the pre-independence time. But so they could, for example, the theft laws were different in KGF. The burden of proof was on the thief to prove that this gold that I possess is not stolen from the mines, whereas in the rest of the princely state of Mysore, it was different, which was like, so the police had to prove that that's a stolen good, right? So these kind of things, there are a lot of, which sort of throw much light on contemporary society as well, I think, So it should look at it as a colonial capitalist venture more than anything else. I hope I answered somewhere. Yes, but there is a lot of unions. I've been going through the union archives for a very long time now. So still a lot more to do because the unions are now don't have much of a function. So, and today why they are not there, the answers are pretty much in the laws that are being brought in the post-colonial India to curb all this, right? You can be put under the jail without a trial for many years. So it's very challenging to go against the government. Sir, you want to say?
No, but the reality is, as you showed, that fellow, after working there for years and years, could not buy a simple ornament for his family, gold ornament.
Yeah.
That's the reality. I have seen those people. I said life was very good in KGF, yes, for us. But for the miners and all that, it was really so-so.
Yes. Anyone else? Sorry.
I actually have two questions. One is so I wanted to know, we heard about...
Yeah, I will translate, yeah.
Oh, okay. We heard about the conditions of the workers in the mines. I was curious about what the conditions for scientists were while conducting experiments.
During the experiments.
You're asking for condition for scientists, is it?
Yes.
They were pretty good. I think we were treated very well. And, we, of course, when we went down, we were just like anybody else working there. We used to come back quite filthy and things like that. But I think the place was very good for science. And, actually Professor Homi Bhabha, I don't know how many of you know he used to say that the country has to exploit its resources. Now KGF was a resource for us. That is how in early 50s, he is the one who instigated some of these type of things, this research there. He told younger people to go and work there. And I think the mines, they were very, very good to us. So that was quite okay.
Did you have, just a follow-up, did you have safety measures that workers perhaps did not have?
Did they provide you safety measures which are not...
Safety measures, I forgot to say. Actually, when we were asked to go from Bombay and work there, we were not worried, we were all too young to worry about things like that. But we were still told that it is safer than walking around in Bombay. Okay. And for us, okay, as I said, we were too young, we didn't care about those things. But you see, as I think it was said, there were quite often these rock bursts and things like that, okay. And initially when we started, I think I spent almost 3 full years in the 60s. We were quite scared. But with time, I think we even ignored, we just got used to some of those things. But I'm sure I used to see quite often the ambulance, going to the KGF hospital, which was, I said, was quite good. But quite often you would hear and I'm sure it carried some miners. So some of these accidents were always there, but I do not really know the amount of, kind of deaths, etc. At least I didn't come across any.
All of us grew up in KGF actually. So many of us are from KGF. And I in particular was living in Champion Reefs where these mines experiments were going on. In the 1960s, I think my father used to be very much involved with the cosmic ray experiment. In the sense that he was the secretary at that time of the mines. MD Narayan was his name.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, and
I
so,
remember.
yeah, so he used to
I'll
talk
come
about.
to you.
Okay. And also I remember when I got married, my husband was from Israel. So he knew a lot of people who were doing this cosmic ray experiment. I forget. So one of the first things he wanted to do was to go down the mines and see the experiment. So I went with him at that time and saw the cosmic. And I knew quite a few people who were working with that. There were some people from UK and all that who used to stay close to our house. So, I mean, all this brought back a lot of memories. And right now I'm writing a book on KGF, which goes into all the aspects of it, you know, the trade union movement.
Oh, okay.
It's a non-fiction book. I've already written one fiction, but this is, I'm a journalist by profession. So, you know, everything brings a lot of nostalgia, and I think even Brinda might like to share something about it. So we were all, you know, at that time lived in a kind of bubble of our own because we didn't really know what was happening. And my father never went underground, so I knew even less. But one thing about the schools, you know, which you mentioned, although there were separate schools, in all our classes, there were children from all, you know, from the whatever strata of society. And that itself gave us a different outlook on life. And today, we were asking, why don't people escape? But I was just talking to so many laborers recently for my book. I mean, ex-laborers, I would say. Some of their children are now, you know, doctors in AIMS. Somebody else has got some other. Most of the children have got well educated and they've left. And ex-miners themselves say they don't want the mines to be opened again. They don't want their children to go into the mines because it was very exploitative. What they could do, they did. Whether they want it opened again, I don't know. I'm not very sure. I asked one miner, what if Adani comes and says he'll open the mines again? He said, no, we want only this land. We don't want the mines again. I mean, this is my reading of the situation.
Please join me in a huge round of applause for the speakers today.
Thank you, thank you.